The story of how I uncovered Margaret's true nature began long before Uncle Robert's death. It started with a seemingly innocent conversation at his 65th birthday party, 3 years before he passed away. I remembered that day vividly. The Rodriguez family gatherings were always tense affairs, filled with unspoken tensions and carefully maintained facades. My parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, ran a small accounting firm in San Diego, and I had grown up learning to read between the lines of financial statements and family dynamics. Uncle Robert had always been different from the rest of the family, a self-made tech entrepreneur. He stood out with his crisp suits and calculated demeanor. When he introduced Margaret to the family, something felt off from the beginning. "Elena," he had pulled me aside that day, away from the bustling party. "I want you to meet my wife, Margaret." She was stunning, I'll give her that. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At 43, she moved with a confidence that suggested she was used to getting exactly what she wanted. "Your uncle tells me you're an accountant," Margaret had said, her voice a practiced blend of warmth and condescension. How quaint. The subtle emphasis on quaint wasn't lost on me, but Uncle Robert seemed oblivious, his eyes filled with an adoration that seemed almost desperate. It was my cousin David who first raised suspicions, a corporate lawyer with a razor-sharp instinct for human behavior. He pulled me aside during the party. "Something's not right with her," David whispered, nursing a glass of scotch. "Robert changed after meeting Margaret. He's making decisions that don't make sense." At the time, I dismissed David's concerns. Uncle Robert was brilliant, successful, surely he knew what he was doing. But as months passed, strange financial transactions began to catch my eye. Small transfers, carefully orchestrated movements of money that would be invisible to most, but not to me. My work as a forensic accountant had trained me to see patterns others missed, and Margaret's financial trail was becoming increasingly suspicious. When Uncle Robert died 3 months ago, the full picture began to emerge. Margaret's immediate demand for monthly support, her aggressive pursuit of Robert's assets, the convenient timing of their marriage, everything started to form a pattern. "I'll email you the documentation," I told Margaret, breaking the silence that had stretched between us. "I think you'll find it very interesting." "What documentation?" she demanded, a note of panic creeping into her voice. "Evidence of your financial manipulations," I replied coldly, "including the offshore accounts you thought nobody would discover." The first piece of evidence came from an unlikely source, a USB drive hidden in my uncle's home office, which I discovered during the initial sorting of his belongings. My cousin David had helped me go through Uncle Robert's study, a meticulously organized space that reflected his analytical mind. Rows of tech industry journals lined mahogany shelves, financial reports were neatly filed, and his computer was password protected with multiple layers of encryption. "This is going to be a nightmare," David muttered, running his hands through his hair. Robert was always paranoid about digital security. But I knew better. Paranoid people often left the most obvious clues in the most unexpected places. The USB drive was tucked inside an old leather-bound notebook, wedged between pages of what appeared to be personal notes about a software project from 3 years ago. When I plugged it into my laptop, I realized I'd stumbled upon something far more significant than simple work documents. Forensic accounting is part science, part detective work, and this USB drive was about to become Exhibit A in the case against Margaret. The files revealed a complex web of financial transactions. Margaret had been systematically redirecting funds from Robert's personal accounts to a series of offshore investments, small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, carefully calculated to avoid immediate detection. But the amounts had been increasing. In the last year of Robert's life, the transfers had become bolder, more frequent. My phone buzzed. It was David. "Tell me you've found something," he said without preamble. I outlined the initial findings. David, who had always been skeptical of Margaret, listened intently. "There's more," I said. "I'm tracking down a lead from one of the offshore accounts. Something doesn't add up." The lead came from a former employee of Robert's tech company, a woman named Sarah Chen. She had worked in the financial department and had been quietly let go 6 months before Robert's marriage to Margaret. When I reached out, Sarah was hesitant to talk, but money has a way of loosening tongues. "Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th, she had texted, "cash only, and don't tell anyone." The meeting was carefully choreographed. Sarah looked over her shoulder constantly, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed a manila envelope across the table. "You didn't get this from me," she whispered. Inside were internal memos, email fragments, and financial records that painted a disturbing picture. Margaret hadn't just married Robert for his money, she was part of a much larger scheme. The documents suggested Margaret had connections to a group of financial fraudsters who specialized in targeting wealthy, older entrepreneurs. Robert wasn't her first victim, just her most lucrative. My uncle never saw it coming, I muttered to myself, spreading the documents across my apartment's dining table. Each piece of evidence was like a puzzle piece, slowly revealing a complete image of manipulation, greed, and calculated deceit. Margaret thought she had won. She thought her monthly $4,500 demand was just the beginning of her payday. She was wrong. The next phase of my investigation required precision and patience. I knew Margaret would be monitoring her financial channels, watching for any signs that her carefully constructed facade might crumble. My first call was to David. "I need you to draft something," I said. "A confidential legal document that will make Margaret believe we're still negotiating." David understood immediately. As a corporate lawyer, he was adept at creating legal smokescreens. "Give me 2 hours," he replied. While David worked, I dove deeper into Sarah Chen's documents. The more I uncovered, the more complex the story became. Margaret Reyes, her real name wasn't even Margaret Thompson as she had claimed when marrying Robert. She had a history of similar financial predation stretching back nearly a decade. 3 previous marriages, each to wealthy men nearing retirement, each ending with suspicious financial settlements. The pattern was systematic. She would target successful but isolated men, typically those without close family connections or those who had become somewhat disconnected from their families. Robert fit the profile perfectly. A tech entrepreneur who had poured most of his life into building his company, Robert had few close personal relationships. His marriage to Margaret seemed, on the surface, like a late-life romantic connection. In reality, it was a carefully orchestrated financial trap. I traced her previous identities. In Miami, she was Margaret Collins. In Seattle, Margaret Henderson. Each time, she left with substantial financial settlements, always just shy of triggering serious legal investigations. My phone rang. It was Sarah Chen again. "I shouldn't be calling," she said quickly, her voice tight with anxiety, "but there's something else you should know about Robert's company." The information she shared was stunning. In the months leading up to his marriage, Robert had been slowly pushed out of day-to-day operations of the company he founded. Subtle board manipulations, strategic meetings where he was increasingly marginalized. Margaret had connections, Sarah whispered, people who knew exactly how to isolate Robert, how to make him feel dependent on her. By the time Robert realized what was happening, he was already trapped. I spent the next week meticulously building a comprehensive file: bank statements, communication records, financial transaction logs. Each document was a piece of a larger puzzle that would expose Margaret's elaborate scheme. David's legal document arrived. It was a masterpiece of misdirection, a proposed settlement agreement that would make Margaret believe we were still negotiating, while actually setting a trap that would give us more time to gather evidence. "She'll never see this coming," David said when we met for a late-night strategy session in my apartment. My parents were concerned. "Be careful, Elena," my mother warned. "People like Margaret don't give up easily." But I was beyond caution. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice for an uncle who had been systematically manipulated and exploited in the twilight of his life. Margaret's phone call that morning was just the beginning. The real confrontation was yet to come. The final confrontation came on a crisp Thursday morning, exactly 4 months after Uncle Robert's death. I had carefully orchestrated every detail. David was on standby. Our family lawyer Michael Rodriguez was prepared, and we had assembled a dossier that would make Margaret's carefully constructed life crumble within minutes. The location was strategic, a small conference room in a downtown law office, neutral ground that would prevent any dramatic public scenes Margaret might be tempted to create. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the perfectly coiffed woman from the birthday party. This Margaret looked tired, desperate. Her designer clothes were slightly rumpled, her makeup applied hastily. "Let's get this over with," she said, refusing to make eye contact. I spread the documents across the table: bank statements, communication records, detailed forensic accounting trails that exposed her entire network of financial manipulation. "We know everything," I said quietly. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in systematic exposure. Each document revealed another layer of Margaret's elaborate scheme: her previous marriages, the calculated way she isolated her targets, the offshore accounts, The network of accomplices who helped her execute her financial predations. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Sarah Chen had provided internal communications that showed how Margaret had deliberately undermined Robert's position in his own company, isolating him from board members and key executives. "You systematically stripped him of everything," I explained, my voice clinical and detached, "not just his financial resources, but his professional dignity." Margaret's composure began to crack. "You don't understand," she stammered. "Robert wanted this. He loved me." David leaned forward. "Financial records show he transferred over $3.2 million to accounts you controlled in the last 18 months of his life. Those aren't the actions of someone in a loving relationship. Those are the actions of someone being manipulated." The legal strategy was precise. We weren't just seeking to block her monthly demands. We were preparing a comprehensive case that would expose her entire network of financial fraud. The final blow came from an unexpected direction. The tech company Robert had founded was preparing a separate corporate investigation. The board, now fully aware of Margaret's manipulations, was ready to pursue legal action that would make my family's case look mild in comparison. "You have two choices," I said, sliding a document across the table. "Accept this settlement, which includes zero ongoing financial support and a legally binding agreement to never contact our family again, or we pursue full legal action that will expose everything." Margaret's world was collapsing. Her network of financial manipulators was already being investigated. The offshore accounts were being frozen. Her carefully constructed life was unraveling thread by thread. She signed the document. In the weeks that followed, the full extent of Margaret's schemes became public. Multiple investigations were launched. Other victims came forward, emboldened by our exposure of her tactics. Uncle Robert's tech company, freed from her manipulative influence, began to rebuild. They established a foundation in his name, focusing on supporting young entrepreneurs. My cousin David was right. Some people never see the consequences of their actions coming. As for me, I continued my work as a forensic accountant. But this case, this personal mission, had changed me. I understood now that sometimes justice requires patience, precision, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. Margaret's monthly $4,500 demand was nothing compared to the price she would ultimately pay. The end.